Well, good evening. So good to be together. Go ahead and open your Bibles to Acts chapter 17. Acts chapter 17. On Sunday nights, we've been doing this series entitled Surprised by Truth. Life-changing encounters of Jesus. And each pastor has shared one of the most impactful experiences in their Christian life, besides their salvation testimony, of course. And tonight, what I want to do is to first briefly share with you one of those life-changing encounters that happened to me while I was a student. But then the rest of our time, I want you to hear about some recent life-changing encounters with Jesus that our students here at FBC had experienced on a recent mission trip we took. But first, let's go to the Bible. Here in Acts 17, I just want to read one verse here. Acts 17, verse 16. It says, "Now, while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols." Here in Acts 17, Paul is on his second missionary journey, and he arrives at what is one of the leading cities of his day in the whole world. Here he comes to at least one of the most influential cities of his day. He's arrived finally now in Athens. It must have been an amazing city to behold. The architecture would have been stunning and spectacular and awe-inspiring. Leading philosophers, schools of education. It would have been a sight to behold, for sure. But the Apostle Paul, as he traveled through the city, what struck him as he talked to people and saw the sights was not what I just described. What he was struck by was the lostness of the city. The lostness. Look at verse 16 again. It says, his spirit was provoked within him as he saw that the city was full of idols. When I read these words, what I take them to mean is the Apostle Paul's heart was broken. He was broken after these people were worshiping idols, far from Jesus Christ. They were lost. It broke him to his core because he's surrounded by everyone around him was just lost in this amazing city. These people were just living their life, doing their jobs, taking care of their family, eating meals. But apart from Jesus Christ, even though they seemed fine, they were lost. And if they remained in that state of lostness, if they never trust in Jesus Christ, if they didn't hear the life-saving message that Jesus is the sinless Son of God who died on the cross for their sin, if they would but trust in that death and resurrection power and turn from their sin and be raised anew with Christ, apart from that message that they would embrace, they'd be lost forever and experience eternal punishment in hell. And Paul's heart, his spirit was provoked. You know, as Christians, we know that this message of the gospel is true. We know that people that are lost are on their way to hell. But sometimes it hits us afresh in ways we don't expect. We need times in our life when it moves from just, yeah, we know it's true, to, wow, it impacts me. It moves from the head to the heart. And it lodges there for us. And it changes what we care about. Changes what we talk about. Changes what we want to prioritize in our life. And for me, when this life-changing encounter lodged its truth deep in its heart, for me, happened when I was a college student. I was in Bible college in northeastern Pennsylvania. We were about 2.5 hours from New York City. And it was my freshman year. And some older students in my dorm came to me one day and said, hey, we're taking this trip to New York City to work with this open-air evangelist there. And we're going to do some evangelism and travel around the city to see the sights. You want to come? Well, there wasn't a lot happening in my college town. It sounded like a cool weekend. Spend in New York City. Sure, I'm in. Let's go. I didn't exactly know all of what I was signing up for, but I went. I thought it was a fun weekend getaway, but what we did on that trip was we worked with an open-air evangelist, a missionary, and we did all kinds of open-air evangelism, including street preaching, right there in the heart of New York City. And I didn't even realize what I was getting into, But after watching a few of the older students taking a stab at it, the open-air missionary said to me, "All right, Richard, your turn, you're up next." I was like, "What?" I mean, I had never even preached any sermon yet at this point. I was 18 years old, let alone preached in a noisy bus station in lower Manhattan out in the street to a bunch of people who didn't give a rip about what I was about to say. Nevertheless, I said, okay. I gave it a try. I did my best. And we used little ropes to illustrate the story of the gospel, to get people's attention, to kind of collect their attention. We just started yelling. We used paint boards sometimes to share the gospel. Here's a few pictures of me as a college student there in New York City. We used that rope to try to get their attention and show how people think of people's sins as different lengths, but actually in God's eyes, they're all in trouble. And then we use paint boards to try to get attention for people, and then we try to share the gospel with them. And you just have to yell real loud. We didn't have amplification. Sometimes people got upset, yelled back. Sometimes we got in conversations and got to share the gospel with people. I know of people who came to know Christ as their Savior as a result of that. But these experiences were impactful on this trip, but it was later that afternoon in that first trip, I was kind of on the high from doing this, and you're kind of jazzed up. But we were sitting on a park bench there in New York City with just hordes of people everywhere. It's New York City. And I was talking with this missionary. And as we're sitting on that park bench, he says to me something I'll never forget. He says, "Richard, do you see all these people walking around? People come to the city all the time to see the sights, but all these people, they're not just background scenery. They're people that are lost. They're on their way to hell unless someone tells them about Jesus." And it was something about that conversation and that experience of being with that missionary and working with him and seeing his boldness to go share the gospel with anybody that made a lasting impression on me, a life-changing encounter for me. And I continued to go on those trips. In fact, by the end of my freshman year of college, I was actually recruited to lead those trips. And so I took about 6 of those trips, sometimes more every year, trying to bring more students with me as we traveled to try to do open-air evangelism there in New York City. And as I had those opportunities to share the gospel and walk side by side for 3 years with that missionary, I got to see his heart for the gospel and his burden for lostness. His burden to see those lost people that we just let pass by as background scenery come to know Christ. It was partly that experience of sharing the gospel with lost people in a big city and working with a missionary that shaped me, that I wanted to enable our students to have a similar experience. So I wanted them to get a bigger view of the lostness of the world, to get outside of our comfort zone. And so 6 weeks ago, we took a high school mission trip to Madrid, Spain. Here's a picture of our group, all 42 of us from First Baptist Church that went. Right there in that picture, that's basically what's like their Times Square, the Plaza del Sol, and that's the geographical center of all of Spain. So it's symbolic of us meeting there as a group trying to reach that city and that country just for at least that 1 week. So I want you to hear some testimonies, but before that, I want to just describe why we went to Spain in the first place, to give you a sense of what we were doing there. We chose to go to Spain for several reasons. One, with a lot of turmoil just going on in the world. Western Europe is relatively safer to travel than lots of other places in the world. But also a lot of our high school students have studied Spanish in high school and to give them a chance to use it. But Madrid, as the second largest city in the European Union, also is a very international city. And as a result of that, a lot of the people there speak English. So we're able, even though we're in a foreign country with another language, to often communicate more easily in English, especially with younger people. And even though it's a very old city, it has a lot of modern influences and a lot of immigrants from all around the world. So it's a very international city. Now, for many of us, when we have a conception of missions, we think of a missionary living out in the jungle, trying to reach people in a tribe. And that still happens, and it still needs to happen. But more and more, modern missions, modern missionary work is actually very urban, as people are flocking to big cities, even from remote parts of the world. So I wanted our high schoolers to get a picture of what the modern missionary context often looks like, which is reaching international people in a large city like Madrid. So we went there for that purpose. And also, in addition to all that, Spain, out of many of the countries in Western Europe, never really experienced the Reformation. So it's very, very lost. There's some 47 million people in Spain, and yet less than 2% of the population are evangelical Christians. Less than 2%. Most missiologists consider that an unreached people group. So Spain is very, very lost. And there's a lot of Muslim immigrants as well from North Africa and Morocco, Asian immigrants as well. And also, Madrid was also a strategic spot for us to visit because it's actually a hub for the International Mission Board. So we got the opportunity to partner with and work with dozens of international missionaries from Southern Baptist churches, work with them side by side during the day, and then hear their testimonies at night as they came and shared with us each night and told us about their calling to the mission field and what they do. And every single one of them did a very different task. It's a really unique thing to be able to interact with that many missionaries in one spot, because usually they're so spread out and remote. So all that was a big boon for us wanting to go there, but probably the biggest reason we went to Madrid was to work with the Hill family. Josh Hill, he grew up in our church. His parents are still members of our church. His wife, Megan, actually worked on staff at our church when they were a young married couple, and they lived here in Jacksonville for a few years. And even just 2 years ago, while they were stateside, their 2 teenagers were part of our youth group for a couple months, so a lot of our teens got to know them. So we had all kinds of relational connections to be able to work with people that were sent out from our church, and we were excited to do that. Their family serves as IMB missionaries stationed in Madrid, and so we got to spend time with them, we got to visit their home, we got to pray with them, we got to hear about the work they do for the International Mission Board to further the gospel in unreached areas. Now, before you hear the students' testimony, I just want to set up what we did on the trip. What did we actually do while we were there? Well, a couple things. First is a church. We partnered with Emmanuel Baptist Church, which is the largest English-speaking Baptist church in the city. They're English-speaking because they're international church. So they have represented on any given Sunday over 40 different nationalities in their church. We saw that the Sunday we were there. They invited our students to come and perform a choir number in their service. We got to read scripture. We got to hear from their pastor. And every single night we met in their building, and we did some service projects there as well. And so that was a wonderful opportunity to partner with a like-minded church. And that church was planted by IMB missionaries and pastored by now a former IMB missionary. We also did a lot of different projects. Each day, our group of 42 people broke up into smaller teams, and we went out throughout the city and did different projects every day. And each day we went out, each team worked with a different missionary doing their task. We did street evangelism in the heart of Madrid. We passed out Bibles in service of a local church plant trying to reach Moroccan immigrants. We went and served at a school for missionary kids. We went to the largest university in Madrid to try to share the gospel there. We did all these different things throughout the week, trying to work with our missionary partners and to help spread the gospel during our time there. And each group got to spend a whole day with Josh and Megan Hill, and also time with Maddie and Wyatt, their kids. It was a wonderful opportunity to deepen those connections and relationships. And as I already mentioned, one of the coolest parts of the trip was every night getting to hear from different missionaries. And what we heard when those missionaries came and spoke to us, after getting to spend the day with them and then meeting their families, is we got to hear more than just about the job they did. We got to hear about their heart for the Lord and their heart to reach lost people. And it was so meaningful as we got to hear them share what brought them to want to uproot their families, to leave loved ones, to leave comfortable jobs, to go live in a foreign country and experience the challenges of all that's involved in that, so that they could reach people who don't know the name of Christ. And our students got to experience that firsthand. So I want you to hear from some of our students right now who went on this trip about how they were surprised by Lostness as they encountered people in Madrid. I want you to hear from several students in the video we're about to play, and when the video is over, I want you to hear in person from 2 of our students who are going to come share bravely in person with you tonight. Let's go ahead and hear this video now. Over spring break in 2024, we brought 42 members from First Baptist Church to Madrid, Spain. 28 of them were teenagers. It's actually the first high school large group international mission trip we've done in almost 6 years. Because of COVID and transition, we just haven't had the opportunity. But we are excited to bring this group to Spain. One personal highlight for me was really being able to hear from the senior pastor and his wife of the church that we primarily partnered with, Emmanuel Baptist Church. Pastor David Dixon and his wife first came to Spain as International Mission Board missionaries, and they've been pastoring this church now for decades. And what we heard from them as they're in the twilight years of their life is just a real passion for Jesus. And they exhorted our students to give their life to Christ, and whatever that looked like, and be willing to go wherever He calls them. And so we had a number of students express interest in being themselves missionaries, or being about the missionary task, and being willing to go wherever God would have them go. We had a really sweet share time near the end of our week where students shared highlights from what they learned from the trip and impressions they want to remember and takeaways, and how maybe the Lord is speaking to them about the need to address the lostness, both here in Jacksonville and around the world. And I was just so encouraged as these students really shared about what the Lord did in their life. And I pray they would take those lessons with them for the rest of their life. And we've set up some of those testimonies from these students for you to enjoy now.
One of the experiences that really stood out on the trip was God showed me that He can use missionaries in so many different ways, and He can use somebody like somebody who runs the numbers to somebody who's out in the field handing out Bibles. And so during the trip, God really showed me that.
One of the big experiences that made the mission trip to Spain really special was when we went on a hill and we looked out at all the provinces of Madrid, and one of the cities, it was called Mecca, and there were a population of 14,000 people, and only 40 of them were professing Christians. And it just hit me how lost the city of Madrid is, and how almost no one there is a Christian, and how I take for granted the Christian community that I have when they don't have that.
One of the things that really stood out to me was prayer. We did a lot of prayer walks, and the missionaries told us their stories about prayer, and I had never really experienced the power of prayer. And in Spain, I just saw how prayer really impacted their lives, and I just learned how to pray. And when I came back, when I left, I didn't have as strong of a prayer walk with Jesus as I thought. And so when I came back, it really helped me to learn how to pray and continue to do it, and even in my own home.
So probably the biggest difference between church in America and church in Spain is the just how few people there are. We know that Jesus says that where 2 or 3 are gathered, He is there. But there was something different about having fewer people who were closer together in Spain. And that was something that I really saw. They all were deeply connected to each other. They knew each other just in a way that we don't have here.
The Lord taught me that He's truly faithful, and that even when I'm really scared, that He's always with me, and that He can use my work in ways that I can't imagine.
So if you're on the fence about going on a mission trip, I would highly encourage you to do it, because you can always go back, you can always buy that next whatever. Through the experiences, God taught me a lot of things, and if I had not gone on the trip, I definitely would not have got to experience and learn those things. And I also, as a result of the trip, grew in my walk with Christ.
If there's anything I could say to encourage you to go on a mission trip, it would be the extreme way that the Lord is able to use you to serve.
Okay, if somebody's on the fence about going on a mission trip, I would say that the Lord will use them in ways that they don't see, and the things that they'll bring back from the mission trip will impact their life, not temporarily, but for forever, and they'll be more bold to share the gospel here and see how their work was used there, and so it'll encourage them to use it here too.
One of the things that I would say to someone who is wanting to go on a mission trip or nervous is that when you go on a mission trip, the closeness that you have with the people that you are with and the things that you learn, you can't learn otherwise. So one of the things I learned is that the people in my room I had never really had a friendship with, and when I came back, we're just a lot closer and they mean a lot more to me, and that's just something that you wouldn't have gotten without going.
I would say to anyone who's on the fence on taking a mission trip anywhere, either in the United States or anywhere near Spain, that it is definitely worth it. That the entire experience totally changed my Christian walk and how I see through the lens of trying to reach lost people. I would say it's definitely worth it.
Hello, my name is Connor Green, and I'm a junior in high school. The mission trip was a great time. I got to experience international missions firsthand and learn about missions in general. One of the first things I learned while on the mission trip was how simple missions work is overseas. They did street evangelism, religious surveys, and meeting with people at coffee shops. Super simple stuff, things you can do in Jacksonville. So that encouraged me to be more active in Jacksonville as a missionary. Another thing that stuck out to me was the vast amount of lostness. As Pastor Lucas said earlier, Spain is under 2% under 2% Christian, making it an unreached people group. One of the days we did religious surveys at a university, and one of the questions we asked was, what did Easter mean to them? And the most common answer was it was just time off work. The fact that the day Jesus rose from the dead had been reduced to time off work really hurt to hear. It's hard to think that the meaning of a day so important has been forgotten. There was a statistic that was said by some of the missionaries. It's that America is 10 to 15 years away from where Europe is religiously, which makes me want to be a better missionary here in Jacksonville in hopes to stop that. One of the more inspiring things to see was the heart for missions the missionaries had. Not just for missions, but to raise up missionaries. Two of the missionaries in Spain were journeymen. A journeyman is a young adult who does 2 years of international missions. The journeymen in Spain were really pushing us students to become missionaries and being open to doing missions after high school. One of them said, God doesn't need you to be good, he just needs you to be there. It reminded me that I don't need to be able to say the right things because it's God speaking through me, and I'm just a broken vessel he chooses to use. Seeing how much the missionaries care made me want to be more conscious about missions as a whole. And also, I need to be intentional in how I share the gospel. All these things I've talked about help me see my calling for missions. After I saw the lostness, I saw the need for missions like I've never seen it before. After the simplicity of missions, I saw that I could do it. After seeing the passion the missionaries had for lostness, I felt guilty that I didn't have the same passion here for the lostness. I hope to change that, and I hope to be a missionary after high school, and I hope to at least do the journeyman program.
Good evening, church. My name is Christine Salib, and I'm a junior in high school. I'm here to talk to you about our youth group's experience in Madrid, Spain, of course. It truly was an amazing week. We learned so much about what it's like to be on the missions field and the lifestyle that comes with it. The missionaries showed us that they served the Lord in ways that might have seemed small to me before, but were impertinent for their work and for the things that they were doing. Through technology, social events, or even a kids' baseball camp, they were sharing the gospel any way they could, and it was wonderful to see. They taught us to utilize every aspect of our day-to-day lives to be a light to others. Every night, as Pastor Richard said, we got a debrief from the missionary families who talked to us about the IMB ministries happening in Spain. One of the families had 3 little girls that were very fun to play with and sit with. And by the end of our time together, they were holding my hand and giving me hugs. And they even made me a little heart out of their toy, which was really sweet and cute. So that. Something I really enjoyed was going to the parks and plazas for evangelism. Our group would go up to random strangers and just start a conversation. We would usually end with a church invite, a prayer, like praying with them, and just a sweet conversation about the gospel and what it means to be a Christian. And a lot of times, they did speak English, which was very helpful, but sometimes they preferred Spanish, so we got a lot of practice. But anyone on the trip can tell you I didn't really mind. For one of the interactions, my group went up to another group of kids that were around our age. When we shared the gospel with them, one of the girls opened up to us about the loss of her relative. It was deeply affecting her family, and she was questioning her beliefs. She was asking, why would God let bad things happen to good people? So we talked with her for a while, and at the end of our conversation, she was crying. I got permission to give her a hug, and we exchanged contact information, but it was just so refreshing to be used by God in that way, and it was heartwarming, and it was a wonderful experience for me personally, because I got to see how the work we were doing was directly impacting another person who was 17 as well. And it was just so cool to see that we could say something that really tugged on her heart and made her say, I want to learn more about this. The thing that stuck the most with me about her was how she said she's never met cool Protestants before, which I think is crazy. It stuck to me that she never experienced the love of Christ before. She never felt as though she was accepted just the way she was, sinner and all, just like the rest of us. And that is what breaks my heart, because sadly, this is true for many young Europeans across the world. They believe that whether due to corruption from an organized religion or rejection of the Western God, they believe that they don't need Jesus, or they just don't care, and that is a problem. This is something that needs our dire attention and prayer, because everyone inside and outside of the states, everywhere has a need, and everywhere has people who are lost. And as they were saying, like, Madrid, Spain is a huge city, and it's less than 2% evangelical. So that is an unreached people group, that it's so few Christians out of the majority. And that is something that I hope will change, and I pray will change. Even though I've heard this 100 times before, I was reminded to look at my everyday relationships and pray for the chances to share God's love and change a person's life. The people that we saw, the missionaries, there was a common theme that we discovered as a youth group, and it's that those people are just like you and me. They didn't experience a spiritual awakening. They just did what God said, and they're living obediently each and every day. So as I see it, living without the truth is like living without hope. And being Christian simply means to share the hope that is in us with absolutely everyone. So, First Baptist, I thank you so much for all the support you've given our group. I thank you that we were able to experience all that God had in store and did through our time there. I'm so happy I was blessed to get a closer look at a different part of the world. And I hope that you can leave tonight knowing that you made an impact on our youth ministry and on the people we would have never met otherwise. So thank you, and God bless you.
Jax, Josh and Megan Hill here, just outside of Madrid, Spain.
It's nighttime here, but we wanted to send a quick thank you to you guys for sending your high schoolers in March to work with us.
We also wanted to thank you for your prayers and support for them and for us. God worked in mighty ways during the time that they were here, not only for our family, but also for our colleagues and for the people here in Spain.
We are so thankful that we are part of the FBC Jax family, and we're thankful that you're part of our family. We love you guys and we miss you guys. Again, thank you so much for sending the high schoolers.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, I hope you all were encouraged. Hope you're encouraged to get to hear those testimonies of students on the video and in person for Connor and Christine, and then also for getting to hear directly from Josh and Megan. You know, the reality, the takeaway we want to take away from this is, even if we don't ever get to go back to Madrid as individuals or as a church, I hope we do, but if we don't, the reality is that lostness is a problem everywhere. You know, if you took a poll of people in the street and you asked people, what's the greatest problem in the world? You'd probably hear a variety of answers. Some people say wars, some people say poverty or pandemic, threat of nuclear holocaust, overpopulation, climate change, whatever. And all those, I'm not minimizing any of them, most of those are serious concerns for the world. But as Christians, we know that the greatest problem in the world is not any of those things. The greatest problem in the world is lostness. And there's different ways to quantify what that means. And so just to help get your mind around the seriousness of this problem, here's some numbers for you. 59% of the world's population is completely unreached. That's 4.6 billion people. 4.6 billion people. Another way to break that down even more is to talk specifically about people groups. That's how mission strategy experts analyze how to reach the world. So it's not really exactly by countries or languages per se, it's by people group. And so if we think about how many people groups there are in the world who are unreached and unengaged. So there's over 12,000 people groups in the world, and over 7,000 of them, more than half, are completely unreached with the gospel. And the news gets even worse than that, because over 3,000 of those, just under half of the unreached, are not even engaged, which means, as far as we know, no one's even trying to reach those people right now. There's no one even making a meaningful attempt to make Christ known among those people who don't know anything about the gospel. So lostness is a massive problem. How are we, as individual Christians, how are we, as First Baptist Church, going to address this problem of lostness? Well, tonight we've talked so far about 3 different cities. We talked about Athens and Paul's day. We talked about New York City when I was a student. We talked about Madrid and our students' experience on the recent mission trip. I want to close by talking about a 4th city, Jacksonville. Our mission is to reach all of Jacksonville, all of Jesus for all of life. So in closing, I want to give you 4 words that are action steps that you can take to address the greatest problem in the world, lostness. So, first, number 1 is to pray. The first thing you need to do is to pray. We need to have our spirit provoked in us. We need to actually care about the fact that people are worshiping idols. People are dying and going to hell. Like the Apostle Paul was provoked in his spirit, we need to be provoked. The best way to do that is not just see people as background scenery. We need to experience what so many of our students experience when they talk to people and they recognize they don't even know what Easter's for. People all around us are dying and on their way to hell apart from Christ. And so, one of the things we need to do is to care. And the best way to do that is to pray. Pray to ask the Lord to help you to care about lostness. Ask the Lord to help you to care about people you know that are living apart from Christ. Pray for our missionaries who are doing this work. It's hard to care about people you don't know anything about. But if you can commit to praying for them, the Lord will work in your heart to develop a burden for them and a desire for them to continue in their work. And for you, through our missionaries. The missionaries are an extension of our church doing God's work around the world. So I want to encourage you on the way in, you all got a copy, if you don't already have it, of our church's missions prayer guide. We update this every year and has in here pictures when we can for security reasons. Sometimes we can. But names, descriptions, and prayer requests written in by our church's missionaries. Everyone in this book is someone that we directly support as missionaries. And so I want to ask you to use this in your family worship times. Use this in your daily devotions. Use this in Sunday school and grow group meetings. Pull one out and just pray for a different missionary. It'll help you to care about the work they're doing and care about the lostness that they are seeking to reach in their ministry context. Another thing you can do to regularly care and be aware of the needs around the world is you can download the IMB Pray app. Our International Mission Board partner, IMB, actually has an app. You can download that on your phone, and every day it gets fresh updates about different people groups and the needs around the world and how you can pray for them. So then there's just not pray for all the missionaries in the world. That's great, but you can be even more specific. And as you know more details, you care more about the state of lostness around the world. So, number one, action step you can take is to pray. Number two, second thing I'm going to encourage us all to do is to send. You know, the International Mission Board tells us that 70% of their full-time missionaries on the field got their calling originally when they were a student who went on a short-term trip. 70%. So just think about that. If we as a church want to send more full-time missionaries out to the nations from our church, the best way to do that is to get our young people, high school and college-age students, on short-term trips so they can experience the state of lostness outside of where they live. So the Lord can use that to awaken them to the need for the gospel around the world and maybe give them a calling. So they might be a missionary that we send a group to in the future. How exciting would that be for our church to be able to send more and more of our young people to give their best years of their life to combat lostness and to be furthering the gospel around the world? We can help send them by sending and having more short-term trips. And as a result of this most recent trip, some of our young people have expressed, as you heard, a desire for themselves to give their life to that noble task, that one sacred effort that we unite for. So I want to thank you. So many of you gave so sacrificially and generously to send. So many of our young people, 28 high schoolers, got to go on this trip. And that's a real blessing, and that's a testament to your sacrifice. You're willing to send them, and you care about that. So on behalf of all of them, you've already heard it, but we just want to thank you all for that. It's a whole church effort. We were there representing First Baptist Jacksonville in Madrid, Spain. But as we think about the need to send more missionaries, not all of us are going to be the ones that are sent, but some of you might not want some of your family sent. You, in theory, want it, but when you think about your kids, sons or daughters, or your grandkids not being with you, living in a foreign country, seeing them more sparingly, you're like, well, maybe there's another calling for them. Maybe you're not as excited about that. So maybe the Lord needs to do a work in your heart. Are you willing to send your family members, your sons, your daughters, your grandsons, your granddaughters to live somewhere else, far away, for the sake of reaching unreached people with the gospel? I hope that all of us will be willing to do that. It's an honest question we have to ask. Thirdly, an action step is, though, to go. To go. We want our students to go, but you know what? A lot of seniors can go too. There's dedicated pathways for retired people to go spend years of their life on the mission field. And if approved at the IMB, you can actually go fully funded and give your season of your life unencumbered by other things to dedicate to full-time missions. Maybe God's calling you, young people, maybe God's calling you students, maybe God's calling you retirees or somewhere in between. Don't write it off just because, like, well, I got a job, I got a mortgage, I got obligations here. That doesn't mean that God doesn't maybe want to send you. Have you ever seriously asked, God, do you want to send me? God, am I willing to go? Am I willing to do whatever you want me to do for the sake of eternity and all the lost people? That's a question only you can ask, but you have to ask that. And you have to sincerely ask that and seriously ask that. All of us have to be either goers or senders. Everybody has a role to play in international missions. If you're not going, you are actively sending others. And maybe God still wants you to go. So, lastly, the last action step I'm going to leave you is this: to tell. To tell. All of us right here, right now, are surrounded with lost people. The background scenery to our life. We see them when we go to the store. We see them when we walk the dog. We see them as we go to our jobs. We see lost people. And eventually they just fade into the background. It's just background scenery. But when the Lord gets a grip on your heart and you recognize the reality that awaits them, we don't talk about hell because it's a fun thing. We talk about hell because it's a reality. It's an awful reality that awaits everyone who's lost. Deservedly so. But God has placed you where you are right now, around the unbelieving coworkers and neighbors and friends and family members that you have contact with every day. God has providentially put them in your life for you to tell them about Jesus Christ, for you to extend the offer of the gospel, for you to call them to faith and repentance, for you to help them not be lost. So instead of spending eternity in hell, they can spend eternity in heaven with Jesus. That's what God has called us all to do. So, will you commit this week? This week. Just think of one lost person this week that you can share the gospel with. And if you're like, I don't know which one, commit that you will do it and you'll find one. I guarantee it. This week, would you do that? Let me close in prayer. Father, I'm so thankful for this wonderful opportunity that our church got to experience by sending our high schoolers to Madrid, Spain, to work with our missionaries, Josh and Megan Hill, Maddie and Wyatt. We're so thankful for their faithful work there and around the world. I pray, God, first of all, that you would just strengthen our missionaries. We pray specifically for Josh and Megan. I'm so thankful for, by their own testimony that we heard tonight, they were encouraged, they were helped, they were strengthened. They loved knowing that their home church loves them and supports them, is praying for them. I pray, Father, for all of us that our hearts would be provoked, that we would care about the lostness in the world and the lostness all around us. I pray, Father, that some in this room would be those that you're called to the international mission field, that some in this room years from now can give testimony that tonight and this trip and the experience they've had were things that, God, you used in their life to awaken in them and awaken them from their lethargy, as we sang, so they care about lost people. They want them to spend eternity with you. Help us, Father, to be brave. Give us boldness this week to share the gospel with at least one lost person. And then we'll keep on doing it every day until you return. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.